Democrats have to stop thinking that what the voters dream about is to be hassled. If you buy a shed at Costco, it comes with this warning. Warning, this product can expose you to wood dust. Wood dust. No kidding, which is known to the state of California to cause cancer. That's right, California thinks you're going to snort your shed. I don't want to blow Pinocchio. I just want to put the lawnmower away. As Barack Obama once said, one of the biggest lessons he learned as president was there is no such thing as shovel-ready projects. Environmental impact statements used to be a few pages long. Now they're thousands of pages of legalistic nonsense and take an average of 4.5 years to complete, with thousands of bureaucrats filling out millions of paper forms that kill hundreds of forests to answer the question, is this good for the environment?
Bill Maher is going directly after the Democrats, and this time the criticism is devastating. Even without being in office, Maher argues their policies are still casting a shadow over everyday American life through the legislation, mandates, and bureaucratic chaos they left in their wake. In his view, the fallout did not stop when they lost their grip on power. It lingered, and people are still bearing the cost of it. This is not merely a critique. It is a complete dismantling of the system they constructed. So, if you're ready for the full breakdown, let's dive right in.
California just passed a law requiring large retailers to have a non-gendered toy section. A non-gendered toy section? Isn't Ken enough? We need a law for that? Do you have to inject yourselves into everything? From where you can throw a frisbee to who can braid hair? This is why so many people, by the way, were triggered by COVID policies. They were already sick of rules. Regulation should be a good issue for Democrats. It's certainly one they're associated with.
Maher opens by reminding viewers just how deeply Democratic overreach embedded itself into ordinary American life and how stubbornly it refuses to go away. The rules they pushed through did not disappear when they lost elections. They're still here, still draining common sense, and still making life more expensive, more frustrating, and more absurd. He points to California's gender-neutral toy aisle law, a policy that feels less like governance and more like a punchline. Then there are the crime policies that critics say weakened law enforcement, helped normalize homelessness in public spaces, and reduced pressure on retail theft to the point where shoplifting began to resemble an officially tolerated loophole. Maher's point is that these are not forgotten ideas gathering dust on a shelf. They're active, living rules still shaping streets, cities, and daily life right now. In his view, this is what happens when ideology keeps producing legislation long after reality has already moved in a different direction.
I think the average voter would agree that banks and chemical plants and drug companies need watching. Telling a company, you can't dump the waste from your hog farm straight into the water supply. We're mostly all for that. But Democrats have become a parody of themselves, just making rules to make rules because it makes you feel like you're a better person. Making sure that everything bad never happens again, which you can never fully do. It just makes everyone else's life a drag. The Biden infrastructure bill has a provision that requires all new cars to install an alert system that goes off when you leave a baby in the back seat, which is something done only by crackheads and people who sadly, yes, do it on purpose. And after every one of us winds up bearing the cost for cars to install this alarm, you know who's going to ignore it? Crackheads and people who do it on purpose.
What makes Maher's argument resonate is that he is not attacking every regulation simply for the sake of it. He draws a very deliberate line between rules that genuinely protect people and rules that exist primarily to make politicians feel morally elevated. Seatbelts make sense. Food safety makes sense. Clean water standards make sense. Nobody serious disputes that. But Maher's argument is that Democrats stopped focusing on solving real problems a long time ago. Too frequently, they began drafting laws that appeared compassionate, sounded admirable, and made them feel righteous, even when those laws did little to improve anyone's daily life. It became governance as theater, legislation as self-congratulation, and policymaking as a public performance of moral superiority. And while politicians were busy feeling proud of themselves, ordinary Americans were left picking up the tab.
A sensor light is not going to fix this problem, and Democrats no longer possess the common sense to understand that not every problem in the world can be fixed with a regulation. But don't tell that to the advocacy groups who also want every future car in America to only start when the driver blows into a breathalyzer. Oh, great, my other car is a Karen.
Then Maher digs into the deeper delusion running beneath all of it. Democrats began behaving as though human behavior itself could be engineered into perfection through regulation. As if enough mandates, enough restrictions, enough rules, and enough warning signs could somehow construct a better society from the top down. Maher is not convinced by that idea at all. Human nature does not vanish because a lawmaker drafts another policy document. People adapt. They search for workarounds. They discover loopholes. They disregard rules that don't align with real life. That is the uncomfortable truth buried underneath all of this. You cannot regulate every poor decision, every reckless action, or every human imperfection out of existence. At a certain point, regulation stops correcting reality and starts waging war against it. And once that happens, it is the public left gasping under the accumulated weight of it all.
Democrats have to stop thinking that what the voters dream about is to be hassled. If you buy a shed at Costco, it comes with this warning. Warning, this product can expose you to wood dust. Wood dust. No kidding, which is known to the state of California to cause cancer. That's right, California thinks you're going to snort your shed. I don't want to blow Pinocchio. I just want to put the lawnmower on.
From there, Maher turns to one of the most laughable examples in the entire segment. California issuing warnings to people buying a wooden shed from Costco because of wood dust. On the surface, that might sound like caution. In practice, it sounds like a state so hooked on warning labels that it can no longer distinguish between genuine danger and bureaucratic performance. Maher's point is not that all safety warnings are useless. It is that this kind of context-free alarm culture turns regulation into something people mock. Rather than helping citizens understand actual risk, it conditions them to stop taking the system seriously altogether. And once government loses that credibility, even warnings that genuinely matter start sounding like just another overblown lecture from officials who believe every ordinary object in American life requires a disclaimer attached to it.
Regular viewers of this program may recall my long battle to get solar power hooked up at my house. It involved this shed, which had to be built to house this solar battery. Yes, that battery needed a house to live in. And not just any house, one that had to follow the specifications of this chart. That's a real chart of the steps we had to go through to get this thing turned on.
Then Maher makes it personal, and that is precisely where the argument hits hardest. He talks about attempting to install solar panels at his own home, exactly the kind of environmentally responsible choice that regulators are supposed to champion. But instead of being straightforward, the process turned into a bureaucratic ordeal. The costs ballooned not because the technology was flawed, but because layer upon layer of rules and approvals buried the project under red tape. And that was not even his only example. Maher also describes needing 5 separate permits just to replace a garage door. A garage door. That kind of absurdity instantly reveals what overregulation actually feels like on the ground. It is not efficient. It is not intelligent. It is not compassionate. It is a system that relentlessly generates more hassle, more delays, and more expense for people trying to accomplish completely routine tasks.
Barack Obama once said one of the biggest lessons he learned as president was there is no such thing as shovel-ready projects. Environmental impact statements used to be a few pages long. Now they're thousands of pages of legalistic nonsense and take an average of 4.5 years to complete, with thousands of bureaucrats filling out millions of paper forms that kill hundreds of forests to answer the question, is this good for the environment?
At that point, the conversation moves beyond being merely aggravating and starts becoming financially alarming. Maher steps back and poses the question that should make everyone uncomfortable. What is all of this bureaucratic deadweight actually costing the country? Every unnecessary permit costs money. Every redundant review costs money. Every office created to oversee another office costs money. And those costs do not remain small. They accumulate. They compound. And they snowball into staggering levels of public waste. In some cases, the administrative process surrounding a project ends up costing more than the project itself. The paperwork outlasts the actual work. The oversight outlives the construction. And in Maher's view, that is one of the most telling features of the entire democratic model. It promises efficiency, fairness, and accountability, but too often it delivers debt, delay, and a bureaucracy that sustains itself by feeding on its own existence.
In San Francisco, the city's so nice you'll step in poop twice. There's an area where homeless people were urinating and defecating, and it was starting to annoy the people breaking into cars. So the city tried to build a public toilet last year, but then gave up when the cost hit $1.7 million. Not $1.7 million for a public toilet system. $1.7 million for one.
Then Maher lands the example that makes everything crystallize at once. San Francisco spending $1.7 million on a single public restroom. Not an entire bathroom facility. Not a large-scale infrastructure project. One toilet. And that is where the real irony becomes undeniable. Bureaucracy always markets itself as the solution to corruption and waste. More reviews, more oversight, more layers, more approvals. But Maher's point is that the process frequently produces the exact opposite outcome. Rather than eliminating waste, it creates more places for waste to go undetected. Rather than preventing dysfunction, it gives dysfunction its own department, its own budget, and its own documentation trail. What was designed to protect public funds ends up consuming them. And once a system reaches that stage, it is no longer safeguarding the public. It is safeguarding itself.
Feels like San Francisco is actually proud of being impossible. Asked about the toilet, a spokesman for the Department of Public Works said, "We are a city of public input." Okay, but I'm stepping in public output. Meanwhile, the median time to get approval to build a house there is 627 days. That's 217 days longer than it took to build the Empire State Building. You need 87 permits, 15 from the Planning Commission, 26 from the Public Utilities Commission and the Fire Department, 19 from building inspectors, 17 from the Public Works, 10 related to public spaces, and 1 from a guy in a t-shirt that says Federal Boob Inspector.
And this is where the entire conversation stops being a sharp monologue and starts reflecting a lived reality for millions of Californians. Maher points to the high-speed rail project, one of the clearest illustrations of grand ambitions, bottomless spending, and near-incomprehensible failure. Billions invested, years elapsed, and still no outcome that comes close to matching the original vision. Then there are the wildfires, where critics argue that the very same labyrinth of approvals and procedural delays can stall preventive measures until the devastation has already unfolded. In Maher's view, that is what happens when bureaucracy expands to the point where it begins obstructing the very solutions it claims to support. At that stage, this is no longer just inefficiency. It becomes a genuine governing catastrophe with real consequences for the people who have no choice but to live beneath it.